hey, on the day of the change of command, have your reception and then go home. Because if you go back to work, you have just set a tone for your organization that says, I don't value family. There's nothing in the organization on the first day you're in command that is so pressing that can't wait until the second day.
Hello, fellow leaders, and welcome to the Military Leader Podcast, where you can find conversations with today's most successful leaders. I am Andrew Stedman, and I know you've got a ton of options to help you on your professional development journey. And I want to thank you for making the Military Leader Podcast part of that journey. You can find this episode and lots of other great leader development content at themilitaryleader.com. And then you can connect on Facebook and Twitter and join the conversation every day that's happening about leadership. All right, I think we're off to a great start here in the Military Leader Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the first two episodes. General Robert Brown, commander of U.S. Army Pacific, really brought some incredible insights in that first episode. Lots of people have written and said how much they enjoyed it and enjoyed his positive leadership perspective. And then last week we had the unveiling, what was for some the unveiling, of Doctrine Man, former Army Colonel and strategist Steve Leonard. He shared his lessons on life and leadership, but also gave the entire Doctrine Man story. So if you're curious on how that unfolded, definitely go back to last week's episode and check it out. So for this week, I've got a friend of mine and future brigade level commander, Colonel Scott Shaw. Colonel Shaw is an Arkansas native, has done everything in the infantry that you would expect of a successful infantry officer. He commanded in the 10th Mountain. He did his field grade time down at 1st Cav. He commanded a battalion, the 3-7 Infantry, the Cotton Balers, down at Fort Stewart. And then most recently spent some time at the Office of Congressional Legislative Liaison, OCLL, before going to the Marine Corps War College. He is finishing up that program and will take command of the Asymmetric Warfare Group next summer, where I know he will do well. And one other distinction I'd like to note is that Scott is the author with the longest guest post on the Military Leader. Last year, he sent me what amounted to a small book of lessons from his time as a battalion commander down at Fort Stewart. Now, you have got to read this. It's over at themilitaryleader.com, and you can search for Lessons Battalion Command. The title is 2 Years of Lessons from Battalion Command, or just search Scott's name, and you will find a very personal, very open, and expansive AAR on his time as a battalion commander that includes everything from the garrison leadership and administrative stuff to tactical decision-making, to how to build your teams, how to counsel, how to make sure you connect with soldiers. I'm scrolling through it now, and there's a ton of stuff here. How to work, make sure you maximize your NCOs, how to do UCMJ. I mean, there's a ton here. It's called 2 Years of Lessons from Battalion Command, and I talk about it with him a little bit in the interview here in just a second. But head on over to the website and check that out if you haven't already. It will make you a better leader. It'll make you a better commander, I promise. So great chat today. Hope you enjoy it. Without any further ado, this is my interview with Scott Shaw. So I want to dive right into something a lot of folks out there might not have seen. You consolidated the lessons from your 2 years in battalion command and shared them with your Army network of leaders, which I think was just a fantastic thing to do. You and I then worked together to turn that into a guest post for the Military Leader, which got great feedback and reached nearly 15,000 people so far. So I think it's really helping the force out there. Tell us why you thought it was important to put so much effort into sharing those lessons.
So I started out with just thoughts that I collected, and I did the AAR in 3 or 4 different distinct periods. I did it in about the first 180 days, first year, and then just got kind of busy with a rotation to Polk in the prep for that. I did it because I think that it's important to learn from other people. I mean, as a profession, we read a lot. We read a lot about leaders. We read a lot about units in action. We read a lot about strategy or operations or tactics. and I wanted to put a personal face on things that I'd learned. I think that at the basic course and at the career course, the number one thing when I was teaching at SIL that future battery commanders wanted to talk about was not how to write an operations order or how to interact with people, but the little things that tripped up commanders. Things like Article 15s, things like training plans, just specific nuts and bolts of things. And the pre-command period is for most people somewhere between 8 to 15 months. And what I wanted to do was produce a document of the things that had tripped me up, or the things that I'd been successful at, or thought I'd been successful at, or people had given me feedback to say, hey, this was successful, and just push that back out to the greater forum, to give something back to the greater community that has given me so much.
Yeah. Had you received that over the course of your preparation for battalion command, and what kind of input did you get from mentors or peers before you went into command?
So a lot, a lot of input. I sought input, as I think almost all people do, from mentors that were, my former brigade commander is at CAC now, and I talked to him about command and just collected some lessons that he had talked about, like, commander's not allowed to have a bad day. Is one that I had pulled from him, and there are several of them. There were several general officers who I had interactions with. General Rardy, who's the J8, before I left to go to battalion command, had said, "Hey, listen, I want you to set up a time, come in and talk to me, and we'll talk about battalion command." And it was one-on-one. A random lieutenant colonel from the Corps staff talking to a division commander, because he was acting as a senior commander at Fort Hood. And there were several other people that I had talked to, or things that I had pulled specific information on battalion command from. The pre-command course series. So I went to Leavenworth first for the 2 weeks of the pre-command course, and I did TCDP right after that, like back to back. I went to the maneuver pre-command course about a month later, and I don't think it matters what series you go in. That seemed to work for me, just the way it worked out by time, by happenstance, but things kind of built upon each other. And I think that there were several things in the functional pre-command course. I think each leader that briefed us had these are some things that after command that I wrote down that made a lot of sense. The director of training at Fort Benning had a really good list. General McMaster was the CG at Benning at the time, and he had a list of command things that he'd had when he was Rifle 6 at 3CR, and when he was a squadron commander in Germany, and a series of it's General McMaster. So you get, he's going to mentor you. A series of articles as well he'd pass down to guys. And I think that the pre-command course, the week you spend with your spouse talking about building a team inside of your organization, and then the 3 weeks that follow that gives you a good time to reflect on those documents that you may have received from mentors before. But I think it's essential that you reach out to former commanders that you respect, and either face to face at a place in DC if you're stationed in the National Capital Region, or on the phone, or just on email, and have a dialogue with those people that you have in your life that are mentors.
Yeah. Now let me ask you about PCC. It's an interesting topic. I think it's one of those things that you never really hear or know about until it's your time to go through it. And honestly, even leading up to it, I didn't really know what to expect. But I felt a little bit of a pressure to get all the answers right while I was in PCC. Like all the command things, you better have it figured out by the time you leave, because when you step in, it's going to be off to the races and you're not going to be able to develop those kind of macro, vision level ideas. Is that how you felt, or what was your intent leaving out of PCC?
So yeah, I think that the PCC goal is for you to leave there with something, to leave there with a product. I mean, this is the Army, and we do things, and at the end of the day, we're asked to produce a product. It's not like when you have the staff come back to you and they say, okay, we have 3 courses of action. Here they are. And you say, well, which one do you recommend? I don't know. Here's the 3 courses of action. We came up with 75, but we narrowed it down to 3 because that's what the book says to do. I think that the PCC, the pre-command course wants you to come with a product. When I showed up I was fortunate to have been dialoguing with my brigade commander as I went to the pre-command course. And he said, look, what I would like to do is hold a conference after the change of command to talk about how we want our organization, this brigade combat team, to look, what goals we have, what standards we're setting. And I want to bring in company commanders and first sergeants. So it's, 68 captains and first sergeants, the 6 battalion commanders and command sergeants major, me and the command sergeant major. And the 3 in the XO were there kind of as note takers, but it was a command team session on those goals and standards that we wanted to have. In view of what he wanted to do, I complied with the instructions of PCC, and I constructed a loose vision statement that was not it was kind of guidance for the first 3 months of how knowing that the unit was coming off of a rotation in Afghanistan, knowing that they'd taken leave. Hey, these are the kind of the 3 things that I want to focus on. And then I elaborated on that in a less than 1-page memorandum. It wasn't a command philosophy. It was kind of things that goals that I passed that off to the brigade commander. And these are the things that I think are important. I've talked to the command sergeant major about these. He was coming in with me as well. And I think these are in line with the intent that you have. And I think that they're in line with what is the existing training guidance that I've seen from the division. Is this what you think as well? Just to align the vision, align the direction of the organization with the brigade and the division's goals.
Now, are those like are they training items, or are they priorities, or is it kind of command and leadership guidance? Do you remember?
No, it was more holistic. Talking about values and the purpose of Infantry Battalion is to close with and destroy the enemy. That it's straight out of the doctrine. This is what we are designed to do. We need to be a values-based organization. We treat people with dignity and respect. Just a baseline. Hey, these are the standards that we are going to uphold, and failing to meet this standard is not in line with our values, and there will be corrective action. Exceeding the standard is great, and we want you to do that. Kind of simple, but nothing that couldn't be course corrected to go toward a specific objective at along the way.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So that conference, that's something that was probably set the baseline for the entire organization going forward for the next 2 years, huh?
That's actually the specific name of it. Was the baseline conference. And just our brigade commander, we started out with Simon Sinek, start with why. he played the TED Talk from Simon Sinek, and we'd talked about it before. I'd read the book. A couple of the other battalion commanders had. This is, and we started out with the golden circle. This is why the organization exists, and we created a statement based on that, and worked our way out of it from there, and then held a second baseline conference at the year mark. Hey, this is where we came from, and this is kind of where we're going, and this is the overarching why of the organization. These are what we do, and this is how we're going to get there. To do that, I did that at the battalion level as well, with the officers in the second iteration after command climate surveys and kind of after platoon live fires, after command climate surveys, in a break portion before we really ramped up in the pre-rotation training period.
Okay. So take me back to those first couple days, couple weeks in battalion command. What was on your priority list to get done? What impact did you want to have right off the bat?
So I think the battalion commander should be seen. I think that so two points. Point one, a mentor of mine, my brigade commander when I was a company commander at Drum, said battalion command is the last level of leadership where a soldier knows your voice in the dark, and that is absolutely 100% true. I was talking to my wife this morning about my brigade commander when I was lieutenant. Thinking about what it's going to be like in 2 years when I am a commander again, and what a foreign concept a brigade commander was to a lieutenant. And I can imagine what a foreign concept that a brigade commander is to a soldier, unless you're the brigade commander's driver or you're in the brigade staff or something like that. The battalion commander's got to be seen. If the battalion commander's not seen, and I mean seen in the motor pool on maintenance day, because it is command maintenance. I mean seen at PT doing it and doing it hard and doing it with a rifle platoon. I mean seen on the range shooting and hopefully shooting well. I mean seen during a live fire right behind the assault squad. I wouldn't say right behind the assault squad, but behind the lieutenant on a live fire. I mean seen at CIF or RFI, drawing your gear and putting it on and pulling the string and going through the same classes. I mean seen at sharp training and participating in it. I mean seen in the dining facility, eating where the soldiers eat. I mean seen. And that doesn't mean you have to be there 24 hours a day, because clearly leaders need breathing space. But I think that too many folks want to be hands off as a battalion commander, and I don't think you can be that way. It doesn't mean you have to manage every single thing that goes on. And before I got into my scene diatribe, I think that Chairman Dunford talks about battalion command as the last level of personal leadership, which tails onto that. He elaborates better than the last level that soldiers know your voice in the dark. It's the last level of personal leadership. It's the last level that you will know personal, intimate details about soldiers. And I mean, I remember being a company commander, knowing soldiers' birthday, like not in Rolodex, not in a piece of paper, spreadsheet, whatever. Soldiers' birthdays, soldiers' anniversaries, wives' names, kids' names, and talking to them when we're on patrol. And I couldn't do that as a battalion commander. I mean, it's because you got 800 soldiers, and you don't have 115. But it is still a level of personal leadership where you see things that affect soldiers personally, and you can get personally involved in things that pay problems. I mean, you can use your rank to help soldiers out in a rapid, immediate succession. Pick up the phone and call in the Director of Human Resources at the 3rd Infantry Division, saying, "Hey, this is Lieutenant Colonel Shaw. I'm the Battalion Commander of 37, which I was again on a daily basis. And there's a pay problem with so-and-so. Oh, sure, let me fix that right now. I've got this and I got that." And mean, it is a personal kind of thing. So, I mean, that was the number one thing, is I wanted to be seen. The number two thing as a battalion commander in the first couple of weeks is I wanted to see the organization as much as I possibly could. I wanted to get briefs from the companies in their company areas. So we had a split CP. The battalion headquarters was in a building with the brigade headquarters. All 6 battalions were in one building, and there were outlying company operations facilities, the COFs, that the companies were in. And we were a mile, 3/4 of a mile down from where the company COFs were.
That's a pretty good distance away.
It is. It is if you let it. The sergeant major and I had an office that was down in the COFs, and we would work out of there a couple of days a week. Had a computer hookup, have everything I needed. If I needed to do work or whatever, I made it a point not to hold meetings in the battalion headquarters unless I absolutely had to. So we do weekly closeouts right by the pull-up bars down by the company COFs. We do training meetings down where the companies were at. We would do command and staff down where the companies were at. And like I said, I had an office down there that had a gear locker that I could put my stuff in. I left my door open all the time so I could kind of hear what was going on in the hallways. You just get a sense of the chatter of what's going on. So you know what normal sounds like. So you know what normal doesn't sound like. But to see as much of the organization as I could, to walk through the COFs, and I mean, to walk through with a couple, I mean, not a dog and pony show, but me and the company commander and the first sergeant and the sergeant major walking around and just talking. Hey, what's going on in your company you're concerned about? I know you only been in for like 30 days. Tell me your woes. Tell me your successes. Tell me how your property's looking. You know, are you looking, how's your maintenance? Okay, what's the deal with this vehicle? And just having a dialogue with the company commander. How are your unit commanders' financial reports coming? Are you able to turn that in a less than 15 or 30-day period so that the soldier gets paid correctly? You know, where are the systemic and systematic problems in the organization that my 2 field grade officers, the battalion's 2 field grade officers, can fix it? Because as a battalion commander, as you know, you can fix a lot of things in a rapid measure with the amount of horsepower you have on your staff. The company commanders will frankly beat their heads into the wall trying to solve.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I've also found that there's a balance there too. I've caught myself pausing and saying, is this something that I really need to dive in and fix, or what is the backstory that might be there? Because you're right, you can jump in and solve those problems, and you mentioned in your 8 lessons of AARs, or your AAR of lessons from command, that you didn't solve all your commander's problems. So how did you balance what to jump in and solve versus something that they might learn more from if they did their own?
The hardest thing in command. It was for me. I mean, I won't say this for everybody, because we spend a lot of time as staff officers serving commanders. And there you are, hands on hips, dun, ta-da, I'm here to solve problems. And I sat there and thought to myself of all the things that I learned as a lieutenant, as a captain, whether they were deliberate or happenstance. The best ones I learned were ones I learned on my own. There was no, there wasn't a magic, somebody comes down and says, see, here's the lesson. I came to a conclusion on my own. And it's hard. It's hard as a lieutenant colonel because you have 2 good field grades who have intermediate level education, probably have a master's degree. One of them probably went to SAMS. You have 2 very senior non-commissioned officers that can solve anything for you. But sometimes you just gotta let the company commanders figure it out for themselves, so that when their field grades, there is a lot of amongst my peers, and I would say, among colonels that I have talked to, and I've heard, there's a thought that current company commanders and field grades, and I would say probably the field grades, have a hard time with training management because they never had to do it. And hey, there's a contractor on the range, there's ammo there, just walk out to it and you can shoot. Hey, there's, this live fire, you just show up, you shoot, you leave. The Kuwait during kind of thing. When we had tight timelines, and there's some truth to that. There's not the lost art of training management. It's not a lost art. It is it's something we're relearning. We didn't have handheld smoke the first time we did platoon live fires. Is that going to kill the live fire? No. Was I slightly disappointed in it? Yes. Was it realistic? It was real. It was a great teaching moment for the ammo NCO, the S3, the XO, the company commanders, because they were, and just growing another generation of guys, So, I think the same thing with company commanders. They need to learn things on their own, or else they're going to struggle when they are field grades and battalion commanders.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that's where your BC and your engagement comes in, because if you have a constant feel for what they're struggling with, you can help coach them through it without necessarily solving it for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as you were looking at your assessment of the battalion, one of the things you mentioned that you identified as a problem that you had to inspect is counseling. And I think counseling is one of those things that maybe is not the first thing in our inspection list. There are plenty of other metrics that we're responsible for maintaining. But on the flip side, counseling is one of the things that people will cite as something doesn't happen often enough. So what did you find, or what cued you in that counseling was a problem, and then how did you fix it in the battalion?
So I had to remove a leader, and I went to the leader supervisor and I said, okay, you want me to remove this leader? I'd like to see his counseling packet. And the leader said, well, I've verbally counseled him a couple of times. And I said, look, this is a performance matter. This is not, there's a difference between a legal or moral infraction that causes the removal, relief, or reassignment of a leader. That's easy, because there's paperwork that comes either on the legal side or in the civilian side. That's one of those, it's an easy one. But when it's a performance-based reassignment or removal or relief, then I need someone to show me a pattern that it did happen and that there was corrective action taken. So here's my philosophy on kind of my thought. I wouldn't say it's a philosophy on lieutenants, and I would say the same thing about probably platoon sergeants and squad leaders. At some point, for 4 years of ROTC or an academy, or for the time that a soldier went through his or her enlisted service and then went to OCS, a group of leaders, not one or two, but multiple, certified that person to be wearing that gold bar or wearing that silver bar. And I think that as a battalion commander, because you as a battalion commander are telling the Army that this person should be a captain. You pick captains. That you, the battalion commander, and the company commander need to either, one, give specific course correction guidance to that officer and steer, hey, these are the things that you're falling short on. I need you to do the following things to get back into compliance. There's counseling 1. Counseling 2, hey, you're still not making this. Here are the course corrections again. And then counseling 3, then you can take some action. But the fact that someone has taken 4 years of time at an academy or at ROTC or enlisted service plus 16 weeks of OCS and the basic course and said that they were ready to be a commissioned officer, unless there's something illegal or immoral, I think you owe it to the officer and you owe it to the Army to go repetitive on those counselings, and that just didn't happen. And I dug back, and I've been in command for about 7 months. And I've been watching this particular leader for a while, and it all, yes, I understand that, but now I understand what the failure is in my house, and we need to fix this right now. So I'd like leaders at this grade to bring I would like to see this person's counseling statement packet, this person's counseling packet, this person's counseling packet. So it's not you picking the best one. Just bring me what I tell you to bring me. And I mean, I didn't go through it for grammar or sentence structure, but to make sure that the mandatory counseling was being conducted. It is our requirement to counsel, and when we don't do it, then I think we're doing a disservice to the soldier. We're doing a disservice to the Army.
Mm-hmm. What results did you get from that? Did you find it improved the situation?
I did, but like everything else, there are. I'm excited to see the results of our Army's look at mandatory and other training to see what gets cut, because there are X number of training days required by AR 350-1 and other training documents. There are X minus another number of days in a calendar. If you take a 365-day calendar of the year and then take weekends and leave and everything else out of it, we are over the number of training days that are available. And things like counseling, things like, I mean, how many times do we pinch PME out of NCOs? I mean, how many staff sergeants did you know that hadn't been to WLC? Or I mean, I'm not talking about going to ALC. I'm talking about WLC, that specialists that PFCs can go to. And the same thing can be said for property accountability, can be said for counseling, can be said for any number of things that are necessary for our Army to maintain the readiness that is required of our nation. Those things get pinched out because there are other pressing requirements. And that's something as a battalion commander that I had to go back to. A friend of mine said, look, if you emphasize something on day one, you got to emphasize it on day 180, day 365, day 540, and probably the last 90 days, because it's one of those things that if you don't keep saying it, that people will do what the organization is driving after. And there are those things that are housekeeping that have to be done, and you have to remind people that they have to be done, or else they don't get done because something else becomes a priority.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, kind of in line with that, on the, not just the poor performance side, but think about, the junior leaders that you're evaluating. What's the first quality that you look for in assessing, the future of a junior leader?
So I will go with what I would assess as a battalion commander. I think that a willingness to learn, and I think that a desire to be in the organization are two of the most important things. A desire to be part of that which you are that which you are part of. For lieutenants, I think too often we look at badges, we look at, hey, this guy's running as fast as he can. Those are important, but they're not the most important. I mean, do I think that a platoon leader should go to Ranger School? Yes, I do. Would I, as a battalion commander, put a lieutenant into a platoon without a Ranger tab? Yes, I would. because he can get that later. Because I don't know where in 5 years that brand new lieutenant is going to be. But right now, he needs to be a platoon leader, and he needs to learn his craft or her craft. So I think that a willingness to learn and a willingness to be part of the organization are the two most important things, or one and two: willingness to learn and willingness to be part of that organization, and not my platoon, but the platoon is part of a company, it's part of a battalion. I mean, you got to be able to see two levels up, in order to be successful in any organization. And the higher you go, the higher you got to be able to see. I mean, company commanders have got to see how they fit inside of the division sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. So when you think about those junior leaders, and a willingness to learn and an eagerness to learn is high on the list. What does it look like for, let's just take a young lieutenant, a platoon leader. What should his or her professional development routine be? Like what information, what sources, what research should they be doing to get better and grow?
So I think a number of things. So I think I made a chart when I was in the pre-command course. Hey, this is what I think that leader development ought to look like for a lieutenant that shows up, and it was a stickler thing. And I think a battalion commander. I mean, the battalion commander's got to be thinking down two levels to what development ought to look like, and the command sergeant major's got to be doing the same thing. I think the command sergeant major's got to help out first sergeants too to look at what squad leaders ought to be developing. I think that there are gates positions that lieutenants have got to hold. They've got to be a leader of some sort, whether it's a platoon leader or something. I mean, I can't look at a BSB or a CSSB and figure out what that is. But in an infantry battalion, you got to be a platoon leader. You need to do some time on the staff. You need to do some kind of specialty platoon, and whether that's if you're in an infantry, an IBCT, that's a D company platoon, like a weapons platoon, or scouts or mortars, or some sort of. I made a truck platoon. We needed to be mobile, and we had extra trucks. We were doing the turn-in. The loss of a truck company inside of the BSB kind of hampered the mobility of the brigade. We weren't getting the CSSB. They were on a different timeline from us, so I made a truck platoon, and then that became a specialty platoon. So I think that from the top, I think there's got to be a development of positions. From the bottom, I think that if a lieutenant does not have a book in their hand, that they need to seriously consider getting one in their hand. I think number one, a lieutenant needs to be with their platoon all the time. Like, I don't need lieutenants doing lieutenant PT. I don't need lieutenants doing, lieutenant lunch every now and then, it's fine. But I need lieutenants being with squad leaders, learning about the javelin, lieutenants learning their craft, learning how the flow of parts comes from the arms room to the equipment, checking their equipment, making sure that it works in their equipment, to make sure that they know how it works and how to function it. How the machine gun physically works, how it goes on the tripod, how it comes off the tripod, how the sight fits on. I mean, the technical aspects and reading the TMs. And I don't mean memorizing them, but looking at the technical manuals to make sure that they are technically proficient. I think that a lieutenant should be tactically proficient, and that doesn't mean just reading the infantry rifle platoon and squad or the infantry company, but taking a look at historical examples of infantry platoons and infantry companies. And there are several books. There's one called The Killing Zone, which is one that I go back to probably once a year, about a platoon in Vietnam, looking at Band of Brothers, looking at Dick Winter's autobiography, there's a British company that Stephen Ambrose wrote about called Pegasus Bridge, D Company of the Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire Infantry. Looking at every aspect of tactical employment of companies, and then taking a look at some tactical employment of battalions, because the platoon is part of a company, which is part of a battalion. There are plenty of times when platoons have gotten separate missions that they've had to, the lieutenant has got to figure out how to talk to the battalion, or the lieutenant's got to figure out how to take over the company because the company commander is killed or wounded or taken out of action, and the XO is not in position to take over. So I think that lieutenants need to be looking at the tactical employment of platoons, companies, and battalions out of history. And furthermore, I mean, each organization is tied to a region of some sort, whether it's Pacific Command or European Command or Central Command or Southern Command. So I think that lieutenants ought to, I don't know anyone that has a flip phone at all. No, there's probably one person that has a flip phone. Every lieutenant has a smartphone. Every lieutenant has an iPad. Most platoons have got computers. I mean, I think a lieutenant ought to know kind of what's going on in their AOR. So, get on The Economist, get on, go deeper than CNN headline news, go deeper into, BBC Africa or BBC Asia or BBC Europe, Al Jazeera, something regional, and look at that. And while you're on the computer, I think that there are a number of blogs, and I'll give shameless plug for the militaryleader.com. I think that's a great one. So good on you, Drew, and your wingman at Fort Leavenworth. I think Joe Byerly's blog is really good for lieutenants and captains. I mean, and frankly for field grades too. And I read both of them pretty religiously. But there are a 3x5 leadership is another one. Off the top of my head, I can't think of them. There are a number of them. And if you look at the bottom of any of the three of those, there are either podcasts or links to a series of ideas that are out there on the internet that talk about leadership. So I would say technical, tactical from a doctrine perspective, tactical from an employment perspective, regional knowledge, and then general leadership information or knowledge are about the five things that a young lieutenant or even an old lieutenant or a captain or a lieutenant colonel should be looking at.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, those resources it's neat to see how those outlets are growing. Strategy Bridge is just doing some really great things in developing the writing in the not only the writing community, but the conversation around security issues and strategy. But you also have like the Leaders Huddle podcast up at Caldall, and they're talking directly to junior leaders. I think the atmosphere of sharing those lessons, as evidenced by, the small book that you wrote on battalion command, that is something that we are, it feels like it's starting to expand, like more people are doing that. So there's no shortage of resources, as you said. So I'd like to ask you, what is your professional development routine? I mean, what's your morning look like? When do you set aside time to learn and grow?
So, I struggle with that. And that's one of the things that, in these pre-command course, in battalion command, there are several periods where you get evaluations, whether they're 360 evaluations or truncated 360 evaluations or something. And I've been through MSAT 360 a couple of times, True Growth. I've done a couple of more. We just finished one up here at the War College that the National Defense University did. And that was actually one of the questions that we get formal coaching through the War College, and that was one of the things that the coach recommended. Hey, listen, you do a lot of. The question is, when are you doing? What's your battle rhythm for a morning? I will admit that, like, I get on my email the first thing to make sure that nothing is going to blow up or whatever. And I have not I've not set aside a time in the morning to do that. So generally it's get up, get into work, check email, putter around for a little bit, do PT when I was in battalion command, come back, do personal hygiene. I kind of left the lunch period open for professional development, for reading. If I could do it again, I would probably back that off about a half hour and block an hour to 30, and I would block an hour to sit there and think and read. I know it's hard in battalion command. It's hard in command to it's a hard balance in command to get that professional development or do some things. There is no end to work, as you and many people know. So it's a struggle. I mean, it's a struggle every day to get that in.
Yeah, and you mentioned something there about blocking the time, it reminds me of something I read recently, that, you know, we schedule courses and we send people to training to do some of the technical aspects of their job. But then a lot of folks would scoff at someone who sets aside an hour to read on something professional development, you know, leadership or, you know, maybe history or whatnot. And I mean, what if, you know, a lot of people would look at that as wasted time. But on the flip side, it's probably where we should be spending our time.
I think if you're not blocking time, you're probably not doing the right thing. Colin Powell talks about when your soldiers stop bringing you their problems, you cease becoming a leader. I think there's a line between that and developing yourself professionally. I think, and I have been guilty of, well, the soldiers I need to, you know, take care of it, at the expense of, okay, what am I doing what I have done to make myself better at developing myself professionally is, okay, this is what I'm going to read this week, and this is how I'm going to break it up. And I'm not, and I've come to terms with, when I come home from work, I'm not going to read. I'm going to spend time with my family. I'm going to cook dinner. I'm going to be with my wife when she's cooking dinner. Or I'm going to go to swim with our son, or I'm going to go to scouts. I mean, I'm not going to do something. I'm not going to sit in bed and read for an hour before we turn the lights out. I've got other priorities to do. I think that our Army wants us to develop professionally. So I would challenge anyone who said that, you know, reading a history book, or frankly, reading something of professional development, science fiction wise. So if you're reading Ghost Fleet, or I just finished Autonomous, which is
I hadn't heard of that one.
It's good. I mean, I think if you're reading that at your desk, that's not that big of a deal. I think that's good. It's not a big deal. I think that's good. I think if you are, if you're reading something professional, if you are reviewing some presentation, watching a TED Talk, listening to a podcast, or frankly, I mean, I think at some point, if you are not reflecting on things, I mean, like, go out of the cough, go out of your battalion headquarters, take a cup of coffee with you, go sit on a bench and put your green book in your lap, empty, open, clean page, and think, and really, really think deep. These are this is one thing that I really want to get done in the next 6 months, personally, professionally, in the organization. If you come back with one thing after that hour, the book I read, I don't know, it's a couple of months ago, was Mike Irwin's Lead Yourself First. I mean, sit there and just think deep about what it is that you want to get done. I don't mean a to-do list or knocking out your to-do list tasks or crossing off a to-do list task, but I really have been thinking about how we better get after values in this organization. Here are some things that and then bring that back in and talk to your command sergeant major about it. As an hour. If as a taxpayer, I would say that I'll spend my tax dollars on that.
Yeah, right. No, that's great. That's really good advice. Here in my battalion, we have the fortunate pastime tradition to go out and throw the tomahawk. So that ends up being me and my command sergeant major's getaway time, is to go out there and just chat about what's going on and throw tomahawks for a little while. And that feels like professional development to me. I don't care what anybody else thinks.
I think it is. I think, you're strengthening a relationship. You're strengthening one of the most important relationships in an organization. It's a command team for a reason.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, that's good. Well, Scott, let me ask you one more question, and you kind of hit on it when you were talking about your family, and it's just the challenge of balancing the work and the personal time. So what's been your approach, and what would you tell leaders who are juggling just all the tasks that we have at the battalion and company level to do it? How do you keep your sanity amongst all that?
So when I was at Fort Lewis, I was fortunate to work in the Corps headquarters. And I was the deputy commanding general's aide, and the commanding general was Tom Hill, who was the Southcom commander after he left there. Was a company commander in Vietnam, and is just one of my favorite leaders of all time. And he came around the corner to talk to his aide, and he said, "What are you doing?" "Sir, I've got all these things I got to do." And he looked at me and said, "Rob, all that work is going to be there in the morning. Let's get out of here." And he had elaborated on that. I was present for a conversation. He elaborated on that before. I don't think that it is a good idea for you as a commander, you don't need to let things languish in your inbox forever. However, it's going to be there in the morning. And you need to figure out your personal battle rhythm so that you are able to accomplish the things that you need to get done while still maintaining a positive relationship with yourself, your immediate family, and your extended family. And I mean your soldiers and your leaders. When I was at the pre-command course, my wife and I sat down and said, "Okay, this is how we intend to operate over the next couple of years. We will not miss a kid's event for something that is absolutely not life-changing. If I have to be at platoon live fires, I cannot be at our daughter's dance recital. However, if I am not in the field and I am at if it's a normal garrison kind of day, then I will come home at 5:30, or maybe I'll leave at 4 or 4:30. And I will go out the front door so that the staff duty sees me and calls the battalion to attention, because that gets everyone attention too. It's not a self-serving kind of thing, but everyone goes, "Hey, battalion commander just left."
Yeah, boss is leaving. Yeah.
Right. And if there's a range, I might come back at midnight. If it's something that I really need to be at, but I probably don't. But I'm going to go to that dance recital for our 8-year-old. Because all of that paperwork that's in your inbox is going to be there in the morning. And at the end of the day, our Army is going to continue to march and be victorious on every battlefield that it fights without Scott Shaw or Drew Stedman. There will be a group of leaders who are field grades right now who will be battalion commanders in 4 years, and a group of battalion commanders who will be brigade commanders in 4 years that are not us. and the Army will continue to be successful. At the end of the day, I intend to walk up that parade field at whatever day it is that I retire from this Army with my wife and my 2 kids. And that's how my wife and I, how we intended to serve our Army as a family team. We put those things up on. They give you a white piece of paper, like a poster board or a easel board, and I still have it in our house. We ate lunch once a week together. I would go to my wife's office and I would bring her lunch. I would leave at 11:15 and I would come back about 1, and we would sit and talk about very little of work and a lot of, hey, what about Aiden and how about Lucy, and this is what we're thinking about. I think that you have to block off very specific times for vacation, and you need to take them. And you need to focus on vacation and don't focus on that BlackBerry that every commander has. Because if something is truly that important, they'll call your personal cell phone. And you need to disconnect, and you need to get some time to recharge your batteries. And so does your spouse.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I feel like, at least personally, we're kind of representing the backlash to the previous 10 or 15 years with the introduction of email and the BlackBerry and all that. And I came in and told the formation and told the XO, I said, hey, you're going to hate me, but I'm not answering emails when I'm at home. If you want me, you call me. I said, but you guys you're really important to me, but you're a close second. Family's number one. You guys are a close second. And so when I'm home, I'm going to be home. But that's good that you're setting that example for your team.
And I would give one final piece of advice, since this is the final question. Hey, on the day of the change of command, have your reception and then go home. Because if you go back to work, you have just set a tone for your organization that says, I don't value family. There's nothing in the organization on the first day you're in command that is so pressing that can't wait until the second day. And you probably have family in town. And if not, you have your wife and your kids. And if you're not married, you probably have somebody. And even then, if you don't, the sergeant major who just came in, he probably does. And if he didn't come in with you, he can go spend time with his wife, or her husband, or whatever. And I think you've got to set that tone early. There are times in an organization when you absolutely have to be there. But there are a lot of times when you absolutely don't. And that's when leaders are developing themselves and making decisions. If we weren't about developing leaders, then the battalion commander would pull battalion staff duty and the command sergeant major would be his runner.
Yeah, right.
Or the assistant
right.
staff duty NCO. I mean, or he'd be the staff duty NCO. I just, you've got to set time for yourself, to take care of yourself, to take care of your family, because there are times when you must push the pedal to the metal.
Wow, that's great advice, Scott, and thank you for that, and thank you for our chat today. You've shared a ton of insight, and what you wrote for all of us out there trying to take, moving into the next step. It's battalion command, but it applies to company command. It applies to leadership in general. And I know lots of people have benefited from it. And, so we thank you for reinvesting in the force in that. And congratulations on recent successful selection for command. It's going to be exciting. I know you got your wish list, but I know that any opportunity to command at that level has got to be pretty exciting. So congratulations.
It really is. Thanks, Bruce.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Scott. Again, appreciate it. And we'll talk soon. Take care.
Thanks.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Colonel Scott Shaw. After getting to know Scott a little bit and doing this interview with him, I really get the sense that he's a leader that's reliable and that people appreciate. Thanks for taking the time, Scott, and congratulations on your command. We look forward to seeing you take command of AWG next summer. Okay, for next week's episode on the Military Leader Podcast, I'm honored to have one of the most successful leaders in the Army today and a mentor of mine, Brigadier General Ross Kaufman. General Kaufman is currently a Deputy Commanding General in the 1st Infantry Division and was most recently the commander of the Operations Group at the National Training Center. So he has got a ton to share. You'll want to have your notebooks out for this one. Here's a little sneak peek at my conversation with General Ross Kaufman.
By and large, you're spending a disproportionate amount of time with your soldiers than you are with your family. You know, we have to get beyond. We're entitled as leaders, and these are our subordinates that are faceless, nameless. And what we have to do is we got to learn who they are. We got to totally understand what their strengths and weaknesses are, how we can develop them to be better. And anyone that says on day one, "Boy, I love you guys," well, that's not true because you don't know them. But get to know and care about your soldiers more than you care about yourself. And, it's semantics at that point. But I think that loving your soldiers and making sure that they're trained and ready for combat is absolutely paramount.
General Kaufman delivers a ton of great advice in that interview. Be sure to look for it next week. And if you haven't done so, head over to themilitaryleader.com and subscribe by email. That way you get notified every time the latest episode comes out. Music from this episode was composed by Ilya Rayovsky. Thanks for listening and lead well.